The movie flickered across my laptop screen, a muted glow splashing shadows along the walls of my room. It wasn't a remarkable film, just something to pass the time. I had chosen it less for entertainment and more for the simple comfort of routine, the quiet distraction it offered from the heaviness of the day. The curtains were drawn, the door shut, the world outside kept at bay. This room had always been my retreat, a space where I could exist without scrutiny. I leaned back, half absorbed in the shifting light of the screen, when the door creaked. At first, I thought I had imagined it. But the latch gave way, and the door swung open without warning. My cousin stepped inside. Her entrance was neither loud nor deliberate, but it was startling in its suddenness. No knock, no word of permission, just the weight of her presence interrupting the calm. I caught myself sitting straighter, fumbling for the pause button, the silence after the movie's cut off somehow heavier than the soundtrack itself. She didn't apologize. She simply walked further into the room, her footsteps soft against the floor, casual yet intrusive. I shut the laptop halfway, its light dimming, though the ghost of the paused frame still lingered on my vision. The air shifted. What had been mine alone now belonged to two. She moved without hesitation, as though my sanctuary had always been hers too. There was no malice in her action, no overt challenge, yet something in me recoiled at the trespass. Privacy, once ruptured, cannot be restored with ease. I forced a smile, habit, not sincerity, and asked what she wanted. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let her gaze sweep the room, as though cataloguing my retreat, noticing the mess of half-read books on the desk, the tangled sheets, the faint smell of popcorn still lingering. When she finally spoke, her voice was light, too light, a shield for something unspoken. I heard the sound, she said, gesturing vaguely toward the laptop. I wondered what you were watching. The explanation was thin, and both of us knew it. Still, I nodded and tapped the lid of the laptop as if to confirm. Just a movie. She came closer, not hurried, not hesitant, simply closing the distance between us as though she belonged there. I found myself pressing the laptop shut and rising to meet her, not out of welcome but instinct. The moment her steps carried her fully inside, I swung the door closed behind her. It clicked softly, but in that small sound lay a decision I did not immediately understand. The barrier was drawn. Whatever this was, it would remain contained here, in this dim room with its single glow of light now muted by the closed laptop. She perched at the edge of my bed, uninvited yet comfortable, her hands folded loosely in her lap. Her face was obscured by the fall of her hair, her features lost in shadow. Yet the outline of her posture, the curve of her shoulders, the set of her head, those spoke loudly enough. I felt the strangeness of it all settle around us, pressing like the air before a storm. We exchanged small words, the kind that carried no real meaning. She asked if I was bored, if the film had been worth the time, if I had plans for tomorrow. I answered with short phrases, each one careful, measured, as though any slip might reveal more than I intended. Our voices felt too loud for the room, echoing against the silence that had reigned before her intrusion. The longer she stayed, the sharper my awareness grew. Every detail seemed magnified, the slight shift of her weight on the mattress, the faint rustle of fabric, the sound of her breathing, steady, patient, unhurried. I kept glancing toward the door, though I knew it was shut. Closed by my own hand. Why had I done that? The thought pricked at me. If I had left it ajar, her presence might have felt temporary, accidental. But shutting it had sealed us together, turned the ordinary into something heavier, something waiting to tip into the unfamiliar. Her eyes met mine briefly, then drifted away, as if the moment had not mattered. But it had. At least, it had to me. The silence stretched. Not comfortable silence, never that, but something taut, a thread pulled too tight. I searched for words, for an excuse to end the strangeness, yet none came. And then she smiled, the smallest shift of lips half hidden by her hair. It was not a smile of joy or politeness, but one of recognition, as if she, too, sensed the weight of the closed door, the change in the air. I sat down across from her, the space between us narrow, the air thick. For the first time that night, the movie was forgotten. The door stayed closed, and with every passing second, its presence weighed heavier than the silence between us. I had not meant for it to matter so much, but now it did. The latch had drawn a boundary, and that boundary was not for keeping others out, it was for keeping us in. She remained on the bed, legs crossed, one hand propped against the mattress for balance. Her posture was casual, but the ease in it felt unnatural here, in my space. I sat across from her, trying to reclaim the calm that had been mine before she entered, though it was already beyond reach. She asked about the movie again. I described it briefly, my words clipped, functional, as though rehearsed for an audience that wasn't there. She nodded but didn't look at the laptop or the darkened screen. Her attention was elsewhere, not on what I was saying but on how I was saying it, on me. Her nearness pressed against my senses. I could hear the faint creak of the bedsprings beneath her, could smell the trace of perfume or perhaps just the clean scent of her hair. Every ordinary detail sharpened into something deliberate, something I could not ignore. The conversation lingered on the edges of triviality, school, errands, the weather outside the window, but each subject collapsed quickly, unable to hold the weight in the room. Words were less about meaning now and more about filling space. When she laughed at something I said, too lightly, too quickly, it was not amusement but acknowledgement, a signal more than a reaction. I became conscious of the way I was sitting, the way my hands rested on my knees, the way I shifted slightly as though to create distance that didn't exist. Yet despite that awareness, I could not bring myself to move further away. Something tethered me to the moment. At last, the silence returned. This time it did not feel like an accident but a choice. She leaned back slightly, letting her hair fall forward, concealing her features from the glow of the bedside lamp. She looked faceless, nameless, defined only by presence. And somehow that made it worse. "Why'd you close the door?" she asked suddenly. The question pierced through me, too direct to deflect, too simple to dismiss. I had no answer I could safely give. I hesitated, searched for words, and found only honesty half hidden in evasion. "I don't know," I said, though I knew perfectly well. Her lips curved, barely, but enough. She didn't press further. She didn't need to. The moment of acknowledgement had already passed between us. I felt heat rise in me, not from anger, not from embarrassment, but from something heavier, anticipation laced with guilt. She shifted closer, just enough that the mattress dipped under her weight, a subtle movement yet impossible to ignore. There was nothing overt in her action, nothing that could not be excused as casual. But in the space we shared, stripped of context, it became something else entirely. My thoughts tangled, this is wrong, this cannot happen, this should not matter, and yet they all dissolved against the pull of the present. I realized then how fragile the line was between what is allowed and what is forbidden. It does not come with warning signs, nor does it announce itself loudly. It is crossed in moments like this, with a closed door, with a silence held too long, with the nearness of someone who should not be near. Her hand brushed against the blanket between us, fingers idly tracing the fabric, not reaching for me, not touching me, but the implication was enough. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me to get up, to break the spell, to reopen the door and reclaim the ordinary. But I stayed. I stayed because some part of me wanted to know what would happen if I didn't. The air between us thickened, no longer neutral but charged, heavy with unspoken thoughts neither of us dared to voice. I searched her posture for meaning, the angle of her shoulders, the tilt of her head, the rhythm of her breathing. Each detail became a language of its own, subtle but undeniable. She looked at me once more, her eyes briefly catching mine before glancing away, as if the weight of the exchange was too much even for her. But the glance was enough. It confirmed what I had suspected all along. This was no longer about a cousin entering a room, or about a movie paused mid-scene. This was about the boundary we had already stepped across, even if our actions had not yet followed. And though my heart pounded with unease, with the knowledge that what lingered here was dangerous, I did not rise. I did not open the door. I let the silence remain. The silence between us was no longer empty, it was alive. It pressed into me from every side, urging me to respond, to act, to do anything other than sit frozen beneath its weight. My pulse betrayed me, steady at first but now erratic, drumming in my chest with the insistence of a warning I could neither obey nor silence. She shifted again, the movement barely perceptible, and the mattress gave a faint groan in protest. That sound lingered in the air longer than it should have, each vibration embedding itself in my thoughts. Her arm brushed against mine, not a deliberate touch, not yet, but the shock of it was enough to send my breath faltering. I should have stood then. I should have opened the door, should have let the hallway's dull light scatter this gathering storm. But my body remained still, chained by an invisible thread I had no desire to sever. Her hand lingered closer now, no longer idly tracing the blanket but resting near mine, so close that the difference between distance and contact became nothing more than hesitation. I stared at that space, the narrow, fragile space, and understood that if it closed, nothing would be the same. The moments stretched. The seconds felt sharp, cutting into me with their insistence. And then, almost without permission, my fingers shifted, drifting just far enough to erase the distance. Skin touched skin, an accident to anyone else, but here it was deliberate, undeniable. The warmth of that contact flooded through me. Small, fleeting, but impossibly heavy. Her head tilted slightly, hair falling forward, her features hidden, faceless in shadow. Yet I could sense her expression in the air itself, as though her silence had become its own form of speech. She didn't pull away. My thoughts fractured. This is betrayal. This is wrong. This is inevitable. I found myself leaning closer, drawn not by will but by gravity itself. Her presence became the only fixed point in the room, and everything else, books, walls, the laptop still closed and forgotten, fell away. When our foreheads brushed, the contact was feather-light, fragile. Still, it carried the finality of a choice made. The boundary had broken, not with a shout, not with a dramatic collapse, but with the smallest of gestures. And once broken, there was no repairing it. The room seemed to tighten around us, the silence thickening until I could hear nothing but the rush of blood in my ears. My hand closed over hers now, not tentative, not questioning, but certain. She answered with stillness, with acceptance that spoke louder than any word. In that moment, I realized something uniquely human, the capacity to hold two truths at once. I knew the act was forbidden, steeped in betrayal and the shadow of consequences. Yet I also knew I wanted it, needed it, in a way that defied reason. That paradox burned in me, sharp and undeniable. Humans, I thought dimly, are creatures of contradiction. Capable of guilt and desire in the same breath. Capable of reaching for what they know will wound them. Capable of stepping willingly into their own undoing. The contact deepened, slow and deliberate. The world beyond the room ceased to matter. The shut door was no longer just wood and metal. It was a seal, a covenant, a silent pact that what happened here would remain here. When at last I pulled back, even slightly, the silence did not release us. It had transformed. No longer a barrier, it became a witness. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, complicit in our trespass. Her hand remained in mine, fingers intertwined now, as natural as if it had always been meant. But I knew the truth, it was not natural. It was a choice, a crossing, a step taken across a fragile line we could never uncross. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Words would have broken the spell, or perhaps revealed too much. Instead, we let the weight of what we had done settle around us. It was not love, it was not even desire alone. It was something more dangerous, the collision of forbidden instinct and the reckless courage to act on it. When her head rested lightly against my shoulder, I let it stay. I let it mean everything it should not have meant. And though I did not say it aloud, the truth reverberated in me. The door I closed had trapped me, not her. The room did not change, yet it felt unrecognizable. The walls were the same, the curtains still drawn, the faint hum of the ceiling fan unchanged. But the air had thickened into something heavier, saturated with the echo of what had just passed. We sat in that silence for longer than I could measure. Her head remained against my shoulder, her hand in mine, still and warm. It might have seemed peaceful to an outsider, but I knew it was not peace. It was suspension, the fragile pause before reality reclaimed us. At last, she stirred. No words, no explanations, only a shift, a withdrawal. She pulled her hand free gently, rose from the bed, and smoothed her clothes as though nothing had happened. Her hair concealed her expression, her silence guarding her thoughts. Without meeting my eyes, she walked to the door. The latch clicked as she opened it. The crack of hallway light spilled into the room for the first time since she had entered. She stepped through, unhurried, leaving the door ajar behind her. No backward glance, no farewell. Just absence where her presence had been. And then I was alone again. The movie still sat paused on my laptop, the screen faintly glowing with its frozen image. I looked at it without seeing it. The story there had ended for me the moment she crossed into my room. The story now was my own, and it was one I had not chosen but had allowed. Guilt rose, sharp and unrelenting. Not guilt of discovery, no one would know. The door had held its silence, and so would I. The guilt was inward, a corrosion from within, eating at the part of me that had once believed I would never cross such a line. I thought of loyalty, of family, of the trust that should have bound us. I thought of the quiet betrayal of all those things, sealed in a moment as small as a hand brushing against another. I wanted to tell myself it had meant nothing, that it was the room, the silence, the tension of the night that had carried me to this. But that would have been another lie layered upon the first. Humans are adept at lies, especially the ones they tell themselves. We craft stories to justify what should never be justified. We rename weakness as inevitability, curiosity as fate. We tell ourselves that what we do in secret does not count against us. But the body remembers. The heart remembers. I leaned back against the wall, my breath unsteady, my hands restless. The door she had left ajar seemed both an escape and an accusation. Its narrow opening let the ordinary world spill in, the muted sounds of the house, the faint draft of cooler air. Yet I could not step through it, not yet. I remained bound to the room, to the memory of what had happened within it. And it struck me then, the greatest weight was not the act itself but the silence that followed. Silence is what humans carry longest. Secrets lodge themselves in the chest like stones, invisible but unyielding. No one else sees them, yet they shape us all the same. I knew tomorrow would look the same. The sun would rise, voices would fill the house, laughter would resume its place in the air. We would move through routines as if nothing had fractured beneath the surface. She and I would not speak of this, and perhaps that would make it seem unreal. But it was real. It had happened, and no silence could erase it. The movie still waited on my laptop, frozen mid-frame, but I knew I would not press play again. Some stories end not because the film is over, but because we can no longer pretend to follow them. I stood finally, crossed to the door, and placed my hand on the knob. For a moment, I considered closing it again, sealing the memory back into the room. But I didn't. I pushed it wider instead, letting the hallway light wash across me, bright and indifferent. As I stepped out, I realized the truth that would linger long after the night faded. I had closed the door once, and in doing so, opened another. Some doors, once shut, never truly open again. Others, once opened, never close. And I would carry the knowledge of both for as long as I lived.